All right, welcome back. So, last video I read more about the getting hired section of the Odin project. I think the Odin project is a great place to go for, especially for people new to trying to get into technology. I would say because the thing is like being ahead of the curve is always good. So like even if you're going to a boot camp or like a 2 year degree like I did, it's not gonna hurt. Well, it's gonna hurt to be exposed to a lot of misinformation and have to unlearn it. But that's not what the Odin project is, as far as I understand. So like having a well, let me say, I've been reading the Odin project and I've been impressed with it so far. So having that head up is important. So so yeah, I definitely endorse the Odin project, and I'm working on the getting hired course. I'm on the qualifying job leads section, so I'll continue reading that. Introduction: you should have the criteria that you use to evaluate a job already figured out, and it should already be in your spreadsheet. Yeah, so I'm going to review that quick because that was kind of eye opening for me. Now, there's no option to go back, which is a little bit frustrating because that part was pretty essential. But let's do view course. We're going to take note of where we are, qualifying job leads, and go to view course and go back to the other one. And now we're going to look at the log. So they have the job title, the company, the website, the connection. So that's like the people involved in getting you this job. So like you could have a referral, somebody's working there. You could have the recruiter. You could have just the person who's they know somebody that they know somebody. So you can have that kind of network or that tree of people listed there. Or you can have, ones like this that are just completely came out of nowhere and it's the perfect job. Maybe it's kind of a secret source of jobs that would be awesome. So then you make as many as you need, which are the must-haves. Now the must-haves, those are absolute non-negotiables. So you're going to have fewer than the nice-to-haves. So you're going to have kind of a tier of the things you want in the job, and you'll have a few of them for each. The highest tier, you're going to do a true and a false. So if you know if these are all falses, really, like, no matter what the offer is, you've got to really think about that, and it's probably not a good job. If and then for the nice to haves, they recommend a rating 1 to 5. Like, is this, like, say I want to work in a specific kind of uh like I want to work for a video game company. Well, this is not a video game company. It's a, like, I don't know, they make movies or something, which is kind of entertainment. Well, it'd be nice to work in this industry, but it's not all the way there. So it's kind of 4 out of 5. It's not exactly what I was looking for, but so I think that's kind of what they mean. I would like to talk to ChatGPT about this because honestly, like, I'm a little bit unsure about like what you would want for like your must-haves and your nice-to-haves. For me, remote work is kind of a must-have, but I can't really think of like two other must-haves, and I certainly can't think of like five other nice-to-haves. So I think this is a good opportunity for a short ChatGPT um, discussion. So okay, so I'm gonna collect everything down here, and I'm going to paste this in here to ChatGPT.
The example you've shared is a great start for organizing your job search efficiently. By breaking down the job search into a structured spreadsheet, you not only track your applications meticulously but also evaluate each opportunity against your predefined criteria. This method helps you focus on opportunities that best match your needs and qualifications, making the job search more strategic and less overwhelming. Let me give you a detailed breakdown of how to use this system effectively. Job title and company. List the position you're applying for and the name of the company. This helps you quickly identify the job in your spreadsheet. Website. Include the direct link to the job posting or the company's career page. This saves time when you want to revisit the job description or prepare for interviews. Connections. Note any contacts you have within the company. Networking can significantly boost your chances of being hired, so it's important to leverage any connections you have. Activity log. Keep a detailed record of your interactions with the company, such as when you applied, if you followed up, and any responses you receive. This helps you manage your follow-up actions more effectively. Must-have criteria. For each job, assess whether it meets your essential criteria, e.g., salary range, location, job function. Use a binary true-false system to quickly see if a job fits your non-negotiable requirements. Nice-to-have criteria. Evaluate each job against your desirable but not essential criteria, e.g., flexible working hours, company culture. A 3 or 5 point scale allows you to rate how well each job meets these preferences, giving you a nuanced view of how attractive each opportunity is. By using this approach, you can easily sort your job leads by those that meet other must.
Okay, so tell me more about the must-have criteria and the nice-to-have criteria. So for the must-have, list the top 10 most common must-haves that people might want in a job. And then for the nice-to-have, list the top 10 most common nice-to-haves that people would want in a job.
Certainly, distinguishing between must-have and nice-to-have criteria is crucial for a focused and effective job search.
Yeah.
Here's a breakdown of the top 10 common criteria for each category, which can help you evaluate job opportunities more efficiently. Must-have criteria: these are the non-negotiables, factors you require in a job for it to be a viable option. Competitive salary, compensation that matches your experience, skills, and industry standards. Benefits package, essential benefits such as health insurance, dental and vision plans, and retirement savings options. Work-life balance, reasonable working hours and policies that support personal time and family needs. Job security, a stable position with low risk of unexpected layoffs or company closure. Career advancement opportunities, clear paths for professional growth and promotion within the company. Location, commute, a convenient location or a manageable commute, possibly including remote work options. Company culture, an environment aligned with your values and work style. Job role and responsibilities, a position that matches your skills and career aspirations. Training and development, opportunities for learning and skill enhancement. Management, leadership, competent and supportive leadership. Nice to have criteria: these are desirable qualities that can enhance job satisfaction but aren't deal breakers. Flexible work hours, the ability to adjust your start and end time to work non-traditional hours. Remote work options, the flexibility to work from home either full-time or part-time.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop it here because these answers are kind of weird. Like, for example, location / commute is a listed as a potential must-have, but then remote work options are like a nice to have. But I mean, honestly, like the way I ask the question, it could be either or. So like a competitive salary could be a must-have or it could be a nice-to-have. You'd be willing to take a significant pay cut to be able to work remote, for example, which I think a lot of people are kind of considering these days. So let's see here. Yeah, so these are some examples. So in your spreadsheet, you would have kind of the obvious stuff here, and then for a must-to-have, you'd have a binary true/false for a thing like your salary. Do you want your next job to match the salary you're making? Do you need a salary increase? How much of a salary increase do you need? 5, 10, 15, 20%? Like you could have like salary increase above 20%, true or false. And if that's your number one must-have criteria and nothing else is as important, you see that binary true there, that's the one that's at the top of your list. Benefits package. So kind of before the Affordable Care Act in the United States, this was probably really important, but now you can buy this stuff privately yourself. It'll cost a little bit more, but it's typically not that much more. Then we've got work-life balance, which I don't know is kind of hard. Well, this is like, do you want to work the night shift? Do you want to? So like, you can make that trade-off and be like, oh, I have no life, but I want to launch my career. So like, this can mean all sorts of different things. Like a job that requires a lot of travel too. So it's like, yeah, so these can basically be the same things for each. These are some good examples of what a must-have or a nice-to-have might be during your job search. Kind of the obvious one is the salary. Are you willing to take a pay cut for what you want? Are you not willing to leave unless you get a certain amount of pay increase? Or is the salary just a nice to have? If it's around the same, then these other things are more important, such as being able to work from remote, such as uh, being employed by a certain, like in internet service providers, there's like tier 1, tier 2 service providers. So like, where do you want to work could be a big part of your must-haves or nice-to-haves. And I don't mean the location. I mean, like, what sort of business do you want to work for? A nonprofit, those sorts of things. All right, so that's a lot clearer in my mind. The so Yeah, so you should have the criteria that you use to evaluate a job already figured out, and it should be in your spreadsheet. Look through each lead on your spreadsheet and cross off the ones that fail your must have criteria, then rank them based on your nice to have criteria. You should be able to easily come up with a weighting system that lets you sort the jobs in order of preference. Simpler is better, so no need to go overboard. And this is important because I think a lot of people kind of, especially during these times, have applied to 1,000 jobs and they just all become a complete blur. And when it comes to like follow up, it's like, well, I don't even remember job 436. And it's like, oh, well, that one was perfect and they're just waiting to hear back from you, but you forgot about it. So this system, I think, is important. It's important to rank it because your top 10, you should be really making sure that everything on your end is the way it needs to be. All right, so next, make a column for the percentage likelihood of getting the job with a reasonable effort. Multiply this with the value of the job based on the previous step. Sort by this new expected value, and you should have an indication of which jobs are most worth your time. If the job happens to be with one of the many companies, like this company, that offer to train you for free before contracting you out, read this Hire Beware blog post to learn about these less than ideal opportunities. Part of the reason for qualifying the leads is to make sure you don't get sucked into a process and waste a bunch of time applying to jobs that you wouldn't actually take anyway. Yeah, I think I've been there. That's surprisingly easy. You'll still be able to send out practice applications, but at least now you know which companies are worth sending this out to. And from my experience, you kind of get into this mode where you're applying, and then you kind of stop, doing it in a way where you like assess each one. It's just on autopilot. You just fire indiscriminately out there into the job boards or whatever. And by the time you're doing that, it's like, well, now you're just spending a lot of time for something that's just not going to work out. You might as well just stop and like reassess your strategy. And if you don't have a spreadsheet like this, put time into that instead. So some other criteria to think about in the nice to have column. How easily can I continue to learn at that job? Is there access to mentors and teaching? How good are my peers who I can learn from? How much would I like going into work each day? What are the job security risks of the job? Corporations aren't locked tight just because they're big. they go through restructuring phases and lay off people with with little good reason. Does it pay well enough to support me? Does its location fit the needs of me and my family? How long do I want this first job for? And the other thing is, like, I have to say about this is you might get in a situation too where you just didn't have the tools and capacities you needed to succeed. So now it looks kind of bad. It's like, oh, they laid you off. You were just a lazy, unproductive employee. It's like they didn't assign me a computer yet because the internal processes were so broken. My first month of the job was sitting at a desk that didn't have a computer on it, and then I got laid off for not being productive. So there are other jobs that aren't just giant corporations. So that's something that might be considered a must-have or a nice-to-have, the size of the company. All right, so this is completed. Next one is another project. So this is building your resume. Introduction. The goal of a resume is to get them interested enough to start a conversation. From there, it's on you to speak intelligently about the things you've done. And if you're like me and if you're near or at the 10-year mark, sometimes this might be a little bit tricky because it's just been so long. It's like hard to remember what you've done, especially if you're kind of reaching a little to fit into a new environment that's not exactly what you were doing during the past year. So don't treat the resume as the catch-all repository of your whole life. It's more of a focused marketing tool designed to make you worth taking another look at. And this, honestly, I completely disagree with this. So I think the best way to write a resume is to have tailored resumes. So the way I would rewrite this whole section is don't treat the tailored resume as the catch-all repository of your whole life. Treat the parent resume as a catch-all repository of your whole life. Have every little tiny date, address, phone number meticulously written down because you're going to be asked about that. And I'll tell you from personal experience, if you go through a contracting firm, they're going to ask for the last 7 years of your employment history. You have to know every little tiny meticulous thing. You have to know what you ate for lunch in 2019 on Saturday, even though it's not a work day morning. Like yes, you need a catch-all repository of your whole life. But I think where it's kind of where people get into a mistake, and I know I've made this mistake before, is they put that in their resume, and it doesn't belong in your resume. It's a natural place to put it because you're constantly asked all these very specific questions about every little aspect of your life, maybe even in a way that's not meant to happen. And, to prevent yourself from being like, I don't know what t-shirt I was wearing 10 years ago when I was... It's like, I don't know. It's to prevent yourself from just being like, or like struggling to think of it. You turn your resume into a rap sheet, into every little tiny thing. And your resume is not meant to be that. So my advice is you need a catch-all repository of your whole life. You need that because you're going to be asked every little tiny detail of your whole life. So you need that written down somewhere. Where does it belong? Not in your resume. It belongs in a catch-all repository of your whole life that you're going to keep private. You're not going to tell people your credit card numbers, social security card numbers, anything like that. But you are going to have a catch-all repository of your whole life. And then from there, you're going to custom tailor specific resumes for specific jobs. So a developer's resume is an interesting thing because so much of your value is demonstrated from your projects, which live in your GitHub and hopefully also deployed somewhere online. Despite this focus on projects, you can't ignore previous work experience or education. They are both important for showing the social proof that other people have worked with you before and you've met their standards for applying. It's important to come up with or find on the internet a standard resume type for a junior developer. Most of the ones out there aren't particularly inspiring. The keys to remember are the perspective of the hiring manager we talked about before. That person wants to hire a developer who is highly capable and can get expletive done and will add value ASAP. So I was watching a great podcast, and the quote is, if you have a team of developers, the developers that are going to be successful are the developers that are not going to be successful are the developers you check in with 3 months later. The project's not done, and you say, why didn't you get the project done? And they say, well, after the first week we realized that we needed lawyers and we're blocked because we need lawyers. Why didn't you get us lawyers? Did you not see our block message? That's not a successful development team. The successful one says, we needed lawyers, we got the project done. So like, being highly capable, getting expletive done, and adding value ASAP sometimes does mean kind of going off the rails and doing things that would be a little bit out of bounds for what you're meant to do. And a lot of times, I will say from personal experience, environments are kind of set up to enable that. So like, for example, just sending a chat out to somebody outside of your department that's in charge of something you need, that's definitely going to be necessary. So kind of thinking outside of the box, reaching out, and I'm not saying to violate company rules. I'm not saying to do anything, that could compromise your job. I'm saying that the things right before you are sometimes not enough to enable you to get expletive done, and that doesn't mean that you're off the hook from not getting expletive done. You still have to get it done, even though you're not empowered to get it done. And I've talked about it many times before on this channel. There are I've talked about the 48 laws of power. That's kind of been it's a little bit cringe, I know, but like, if you feel like you're a disempowered person and you wonder like, why am I never able to accomplish the things why don't I have any power in my life? Why is everything out of control? Why do I feel so disempowered? I do urge kind of reading that book, because you'll read a few things in there that's like, oh, well, the reason I'm disempowered is because people cut me off from access from things because I threaten them, because I'm too, I'm outshining the master, and like, people are just worried that I'm going to like take away all their opportunities. So it's like, you have to be able to work with people, and you have to be able to work with people in the right ways. So in order to get things done, you have to be highly capable in ways beyond just the technical skills. All right, so the next one, the hiring manager will determine these criteria in less than 10 seconds at first glance, based on where you've been educated, who's hired you before, and if you've got any really interesting projects that stand out. The hiring manager rapidly builds a story of who you are based on those headline items of your resume. If you're lucky, that high-level story will seem interesting enough for the hiring manager or HR person to look twice and actually read what you did at each job, and then bring you in for an interview. Yeah, so good point. 10 seconds, first glance, that's all you get for your resume. They're looking at your education, they're looking at where you've worked, and they're looking at big projects that stand out. And if those projects aren't relevant to what they're hiring, it doesn't matter if you've won the Nobel Peace Prize. Can you configure this server that was stood up in the 1980s and uses a language that doesn't exist anymore. Knowing that perspective, how can you play to it? It's difficult if you're breaking into a new industry, so you'll need to emphasize relevant education, work experience, and projects in a way that crafts a story of drive and capability. What have you done that shows you're highly capable? For example, your technical chops, any recognition you received, leadership of teams, and can get expletive done. For example, interesting projects, open source contributions. I kind of wish they wouldn't use this word because it's, I mean, I get what they mean because it's about grit, it's about the grimy stuff. Can you get stuff done even though you have literally nothing to succeed? So like that was a perfect example. Let's say that you're hired and the internal IT at a company is just so broken that you don't even have a computer, and for the first month you're there, you're sitting at an empty desk, and there's nothing there. Can you still get stuff done? Well, what can you do? Okay, you have a desk, you have a chair, you can sit at your desk, you can sit in the chair. Can you get a paper and pencil? Maybe you can go around and take notes and shadow people and try to get a good sense of how to do your job. So once you finally get that laptop, assuming you're not laid off for low productivity beforehand, you can really get on the ground running and be up to speed and be just as good as somebody who's established. So like, that's what they mean when they use that expletive. It's like it's not going to be pretty in some of the jobs. You're going to be working and you'd be lucky to have an empty desk because more likely there'll be 2 or 3 people at your desk, each of them waiting for their computer, and nobody has a computer. One of them's like a hole that like is inappropriate, and then you all get laid off for being unproductive, except for the a-hole who gets promoted. And that's I'm being facetious there. People are nice. Nobody's intentionally a horrible person, and if they are, by the time they get to be an adult, they're probably done something really awful and gone to jail and kind of sequestered from society anyway. So just about everyone you meet that's out in the world is at least trying to be awesome. And misfunction, complete dysfunction typically doesn't last that long. It's like you can't go 10 years in an environment that is just totally broken. Like things will happen pretty fast if the environment is that busted. And even that scenario where you don't have a computer yet and you get laid off for productivity, this is what they're talking about. It's like, can you march into the IT office and say, I don't have a computer, give me one now? Can you sit at the desk and wait for them to give you your computer? That's what this expletive there means. It's like, that's a perfect example. So you get hired to a company that has such poor internal IT that you don't get assigned a computer until a month in, and then you get laid off because your productivity is too low. So one way you can deal with that is, do you have a phone? Do you have your personal phone? Call the IT department every day. Call them once, twice a day. Remind them you need it done. Ask them for a workaround. Okay, so I have my own computer. Is there a way I can use that? Can you assign me a temporary computer? Can you assign me, a desktop? You're meant to assign me a laptop, but is there an alternate computer you can assign me in the meantime? So like, those are examples of things you might need to do on the job, and hopefully it's not that extreme. But where it gets really tricky is the edges of that, where it's like, no, it's not that egregious. It's a little tiny thing. Like, you need to recognize a tiny thing like that and be able to get expletive done, even if it's just a small thing in the way. And that can be just as hard, if not harder, than if it's a big thing. Because if it's a big thing, You know what the problem is. When it's a very small thing, it's like, well, it's not getting done and I don't know why. Oh, because this person isn't clicking the review button and I don't know why. Oh, they don't know where the review button is. Here's the review button. Can you please click it? Okay, they're on vacation for a month. Is there a way somebody can click this button, or can we proceed without having the button clicked? Like tiny stuff can be even more detrimental than big stuff. All right, so remember, one page for your resume, one page for your resume. And this is the point too, is your resume is not a catch-all repository of your whole life. But I would edit this to say your tailored resume is not the catch-all repository of your whole life. Your full resume is. Have a full parent resume that is a catch-all repository for your whole life, and then from there tailor resumes for the specific post. I definitely recommend that. So remember, one page, and then I would add in my own advice for a tailored resume. For your full resume of your whole life, 1,000 pages. Just yes, every little tiny thing I do recommend keeping track of and not forgetting, because now the big projects, you're only going to have a few of those, but they come from that remembering everything you did. So remember, one page for tailored resumes, as many pages as you need to be thorough for your catch-all repository of your whole life, which I think you need, and I think you should have it be your parent resume from which you create tailored resumes. All right, so here's some additional resources. So we got tools to build it from. Now we've got this company here. They kind of warned about that. So yeah, there's some questions here. Is it a scam? Getting in the habit of always Googling something is good. So hire beware. Yeah, so here's a good one of what to kind of be aware of. So so you can have a company that's like, oh, 45K for you, that sounds amazing, but then when you look, while you're taking a giant pay cut, you could, if you don't go through that company and land the job on its own, you can make a lot more. All right. Well, anyway, I kind of want to read this for myself a bit later. So, yeah, I'm gonna read that for myself a bit later. For now, we got one more optional reading to get your resume. Oh, this guy. Yeah, I remember that guy. This would be a good person to follow on LinkedIn, especially since he has a lot of like blog posts out there that are consumable pretty easily. Yeah, so I think this is him. Yeah, Trello. So I'm going to follow him on LinkedIn. Okay, so I can mark that complete, and I can go to the next one. So I definitely need a break. I'm going to take a break and be right back. Okay, I'm back. So next part is applying for web development jobs. Introduction. The next step is to actually apply and remember what the prior steps were. So the prior steps were, in my opinion, this is different from they would say, create a rap sheet, create a full life repository of everything you did in as many pages as you need. 1,000,000 pages is fine. And then create a few tailored resumes based on some notable achievements that are one page, that are designed to be looked at by 10 seconds by a hiring manager, and then create your list of nice to haves, must haves, and then the next step is to actually apply. Don't send all your applications out at once. You'll get totally overwhelmed. if you start hearing back from people and need to complete tasks all at once. Treat it like an iterative process where you'll send out several applications each day. Learn from any mistakes you can identify based on feedback. Oh man, when was this written? Because seems pretty innocent. Innocent. So learn from any mistakes you can identify based on feedback from the process, and try again the next day. So I think kind of the hardest thing for job searchers and the hardest thing for me has been that there's no feedback. It's just like you're in the Sahara Desert. There's just nothing out there. It's like this idea of being a web developer or like working in IT is gone. Like there's just nothing there. Like there's Indian recruiters, they're there for you, but they have a great, $8 an hour night shift job for you. They know you have a lot of experience in, uh, in something that, yeah, it's this seems this made me laugh out loud because yeah, I think the hardest thing for people struggling to find a job these days is that there's nothing out there. There's no feedback. You don't get any, and you spend all this time, tailoring a resume, doing everything they say here, just to get nowhere and with no feedback. And it's like, what could I possibly even do different? There's nothing. There's no feedback from the process. It's a dead line. It's like calling a number and it's, it being a dead line on the not even a busy signal. It's like there's like the feedback it would be a timeout signal. All right, and try again the next day. This is not an excuse to procrastinate or only send out one application a day. You should have a definite goal for applications per day. So your goal per day could be 3, 5, or 10. So a lot of applications sent out per day. Over time, you will work your way through your Excel list. It's usually good to start at the bottom with the companies you would barely work at. Interesting. Once you feel comfortable with your application sending and hopefully interviewing abilities, you can start tackling the companies at the top that you really want to work for. And this is great advice. This is actually kind of eye-opening for me. It's like you need the practice. So like practice giving your elevator pitch, practice your interviewing abilities with these jobs that you kind of don't want, because then if you do really well, these offers will come in. They're not that great of an offer, but it's better than not having an offer. And then you go for the ones you really want. Nothing came through. Well, you still have this offer, and if things really start not going the way you want it, well, maybe that offer is better than you thought. It has a lot of your nice to haves. It only has one of your must haves, but you know what I mean. So like this, I think this is great advice because it gives you a chance to practice with lower stakes. And when it comes to the ones you really want, you're going to have that prior practice and it'll really pay off. Go in the side door. Where do you start? Do 2 things at once. Send applications to a few companies towards the bottom of your list to practice, but also look at the top companies on your list and build a strategy. Remember, the best way to get in is not to use their online resume drop, but instead to identify a real human being at the company and connect with that person somehow. Even better is to be so publicly brilliant that they come to you, but we can't have it all. So that's the point of this channel. This I think is absolutely key. So there are probably a few companies that you'd really like to work for. You'll want to spend a lot more time on them than you would for the ones at the bottom, which are hopefully good for interview practice. Not only should you try to find a real human being at the company, but you can also potentially get noticed by tailoring your project to work to them. You'll be building projects, I hope, to stay in practice anyway. So make one of those a clone of the company's top website with a new feature you'd like to see, then use that to display your interest. Get to know the company and its needs and see if you can reach out to address them somehow. Do they have local events you can visit? What do they sponsor? This stuff takes creativity. You need to walk the line when you're not a stalker. So you need to walk the line where you're not a stalker, but you do care enough to push hard. If you're wrong, they may say no. It happens. You'll live and move on, but you'd better try. You'll figure out things that will help you with other companies anyway. So I guess what I'd have to say about this is I really like this phrase, take no for an answer. So like, yeah, the answer can be no, that's fine, but you need to get an answer. And there are, me being a person from the Midwest United States, there is something called like guest culture where like the having to say no is like you've already transgressed, you've already kind of crossed the line. So I feel like the advice that you should default to an ask culture and the worst they can say is no kind of depends on the culture you're in. And if you're in a culture where you can beg and plead, and people are like, okay, well, I respect him for asking, I'm gonna say no, then that's fair advice. But if you're in a culture like I was raised in, where like so it's hard to describe. The best way to describe it is guess culture. So you kind of have to guess what the person would say before, and you have to adjust what you will ask, what you will say based on like a vibe you're getting, how you guess they would respond. So if you ask in a way and then they say no, you've kind of gone too far, because that's when you're showing you're desperate. It's like, I gave you all the signs that this wouldn't work out, and instead of being nice and you know, not putting me in that situation to have to say no because I'm a Midwesterner that's too nice of a person to tell you no, now you're having to put me through that burden of saying no and feeling bad about the fact that I had to say no, when instead you could have read the room and come to that conclusion yourself based on the fact that I'm not giving you the same kind of attention I would give you if I were serious about hiring you. So like that's I think important to be aware of, is like, what culture are you in? And I think being aware of the difference between ask culture and guest culture is kind of for me, it was like this eye-opening thing. It's like, oh my God, like I am a guest culture person. I was raised in guest culture. Everything about me is guest culture, and there exists ask culture. And it's like, why does this advice, oh, you better try, if you're wrong, they'll just say no, it happens and you'll live. It's like, no, it doesn't happen that people explicitly say no, and you won't live. You'll be embarrassed for the rest of your life for making this serious transgression. And it's like, that is true in certain areas of the world, in that guest culture areas. You know, you read the room. Like if they're not giving you the right signals, and you just ask, then they'll say no, it'll happen, you'll live. It's like, no, you're putting them through this psychological burden where they're going to feel bad about telling you no, and people are just kind of see you as like a beggar or a pleader, or like a not a reasonable person to talk to. So yeah, that hopefully that's kind of a eye-opening thing for people watching this who might be kind of in guest culture. I know a lot of people, I think, in the Midwest of the United States are like, that's absolute total guest culture, where like you're putting someone through a psychological burden of telling you no, something that's kind of they might see as a little bit rude, like something they wish they didn't have to do. So they're giving you all these clues. You're not going to get the job. I'm not calling you back. I'm not doing all these things, and you come off as an unsavory, kind of desperate person just by doing something that this is suggesting. Just care enough to push hard. What does that mean? And in different cultures, it means different things. All right, so there we go. So getting noticed by a startup you want to work for. So I guess my advice, because that was kind of a rant that didn't go anywhere, my advice is just get to know the culture you're in, get to know the culture you grew up in, get to know the culture you are in now, and it's part of that fit. How do you fit into a job? How do you fit? So like, I think that's really eye-opening to understand. I mean, just start with that. Were you raised in a guess culture, or were you raised in a ask culture? All right, so perseverance through the process. One of the key parts of the process, though, is keeping your spirits up. It sucks looking for jobs full time. You can go months, 8 months, without hearing a peep from anyone. And this goes back to here. No feedback. You can't learn from any mistakes because you just aren't getting any feedback at all. Then you'll have a day where you get or the feedback you get is it wasn't a real job posting and they decided not to hire anyone. It's like, okay, what do I do with that? Then you'll have a day where you get an interview and your spirits will soar, and then you won't pass and you'll feel like crap again. Yeah. Then you'll get another 3 interviews in one day, and it'll be crazy for a time before another long waiting period. That's a good point. So it comes in bursts. So like you're never totally unemployed for like months and months. Like for me, my 8 months of unemployment, there were large stretches where just nothing, absolutely nothing. And then, yeah, my calendar would be exploded with 3 giant interviews requiring 7 hours of preparation, like 5 hours of interviewing for each post, like a team screen, a one-on-one with the hiring manager, a one-on-one with 3 external departments, a code review, a code assessment, a networking knowledge assessment. It's like 7 hours of interviewing for like multiple companies. So like that's a good point. It comes in bursts. The inconsistency of it is maddening. Yep. So do what you need to in your own life to make sure you don't let it get you down. So one of the things I kind of did, and this is great to like talk about this, is I stopped preparing for interviews. It is as awful as that sounds. There was just a point where it's like, if they're gonna ask me to do 7 hours of interviews to get this job, I just don't have the capacity to do another 10, even another 1 hour to prepare. Because first of all, how do you even prepare for 7 hours of interview? It's like that. It's just hard to prepare for that. And then, it's to the point where like if I have to teach myself to do this job, I'm not qualified for it. Like I should be able to just speak on the phone with somebody now, and based on the knowledge I have now, get a job because of my past work experience, because of the training I do have. For me to have to learn a whole new set of skills through some sort of preparation process for a job means it's not the job for me. I would even put that in my must-haves of a job. I must be able to do the job. So like if I can't pass these interviews because I didn't give enough time to a 20-hour preparation process for the interviews. There's a point where it's just like, well, I'm not qualified for it. Of course I failed the interviews because there's no amount of preparation I could have done because I'm just not qualified. I can't get a PhD in computer science overnight. I'm just not qualified for the position. So that's kind of one of the things that switched in my head when I was doing a job search, and I was going through these 5, 7 hour ordeals, and I was like kicking myself in the head. I was like, oh, I wish I had prepared better for these. There's a point where it's like, well, they're asking for 5, 7 hours of your time. How much more time are you going to give them? Are you going to give them another 10, another 20? Are you going to give them 3 months to prepare? It's like they've already got this time. If they want to hire you, hire you. If they don't want to hire you because you didn't do something right that maybe you could have done right, if you had, done the prep work properly. But it's like what is that prep work and how long is it going to take from you? That tells you what kind of job you're going into as well, because it could be some big project. It's like, oh, I could have done that project if only I'd put 20 more hours into the project. Well, it's like, well, it's a 40-hour work week. Like, you want to work a 60-hour week? That's the kind of environment you're going into, is like they expect you to just put in unpaid overtime, like to just that work-life balance. Just that became a really big red flag for me, where it's like, you're already asking for 5, 7 hours of my time. That's what you get. I'm not going to do an elaborate prep process, and if I'm not qualified for the job because I didn't prep in some way, then my active prepping would not qualify me for the job, because it's kind of a dishonest way to represent myself. Like, if I'm not qualified for it now, putting in an extra 20 hours, I think is not a fair way to say that I am qualified for it. I'm qualified based on the skills I have now, based on the projects that I submitted in part of the resume, based on what I offer based on how I do on the interviews with the knowledge I have now, and not whatever knowledge I can cram into my brain in whatever amount of time before the interviews. So that's kind of how I approach it, because the inconsistency of it is maddening. Yeah. So what you need to do in your own life to make sure you don't let it get you down. So it was getting me down, because I would spend so much time stressing over, oh, I got to do it, I got to study for it, I got to prepare for it, and it was getting me down, because it's like now I've invested not only 5-7 hours for the process itself, but another 20 for preparing for the process. And there's a point where it's like, I can't afford that 20. Like, I'm lucky to get that 5 or 10. That's what I'm gonna do, is just do that. If I'm qualified, I'm qualified. You get the job, great. If I'm not, then it gets me down to invest. This idea. What did you actually lose? If I didn't get the job and I spent the 7 hours on the interview, I lost those 7 hours. If I didn't get the job and I spent 7 hours on the interview and another 200, all night, every night preparing, well, now I lost all that time too. So it's like you stack, like, maybe you're more likely to get the job if you do that, but I doubt it. I mean, somebody who has a PhD versus somebody who flunked out of high school, the person who flunked out of high school isn't going to be able to get the same knowledge as the person with the PhD just by cramming for an interview. It's like, no, if you're that far behind the next best candidate, a jam session or a cram session for the interview isn't going to make you catch up. It's not worth your time, and it doesn't stack the odds in your favor well enough, and it gives you so much, you lose so much more if you end up not getting the job. So that's kind of the concession I made, is I'm not going to prepare for any interviews, If I passed the interview, it's because I already had the skills and I didn't need to learn them last minute. If I don't pass the interview, it's because I was not qualified for the position and the person they decided to hire was so much more skilled than I was that any sort of cramming process wouldn't have been enough anyway. So that's where I went to not letting it get me down. And I thought that was a really good strategy, because now you save countless hours. You can save 20 hours that you would have spent preparing for an interview just to get nowhere. Because if the next best candidate has a PhD equivalent knowledge and you have a college dropout or a high school dropout equivalent knowledge, you can study for years and you won't know as much as them. So you're just wasting your time. You're just throwing more of your time away, stressing yourself out. There's no need. Just take the interview as you are with what you know. And if that's enough to get hired, great. If it's not, then what you lost for going through it was not as much. It's also really important. Now, don't get me wrong. If you there are things you can learn from interviews. So like some interview questions can be very, very eye-opening. I can actually talk about an interview question as long as I don't talk about the company it came from or anything. But I had an interview question, which is let's say you have two switches, switch A, switch B, and then you have two computers, and you have a link between switch A and switch B. So now let's say that each of these links is a 1 gigabit length. How much bandwidth is going to be available from this computer to this? So 1 gigabit, right? Okay, so now let's say we put up a port channel. So now how much bandwidth is available? 2 gigabits, right? Because there's a port channel. Well, no, because the 1 gigabit link still limits the connection. And then not only that, okay, so let's take away the obvious answer. Okay, now how much is available between this and this? Well, now there's two, right? Because it's a port channel. Well, not necessarily, because it's a per flow. It chooses the length for the flow. So depending, unless there's concurrent flows going over both the links, you are still per flow on a single session limited by the capacity of the link. So, really heady, advanced stuff that I learned through interview questions. But again, I was in the middle of studying for an expert level exam at that point. If I didn't know that, I wasn't just going to magically know it before the interview. I learned a lot from the interview. I know it now, but no amount of prepping for the interview would have taught me that. I was studying for an advanced level cert, and my methods of studying did not lead me to be able to answer that question correctly. So investing more into those flawed methods that did not lead to the correct answer in the moment would have been a losing strategy. You can think of it like investing in the stock market. It's like, well, here's a stock, which is a study strategy. I invested a lot into the stock, and it's not worth anything. When I go into the job interview, I don't pass the technical questions. So what do? Do you buy more in that stock? No, you sell that stock and you start using different, and you stop investing in that. You make better investments. So that's a good way to think about, did you prep enough for us? Because that would really hurt. That was probably the most painful thing I had to deal with during my job search. Could I have just spent another hour preparing and gotten the job? The answer is absolutely not. The things you would have done in that hour would not have been effective. The knowledge you would have gained in that hour would not have been anywhere close to the level of knowledge that the person hired over you had. And the stress, the thing you could have done instead with that hour just would have been a lot better. You're wasting your time by cramming for an interview because you're never going to make up that difference in knowledge if it's big enough. Your habits and stuff aren't effective enough to prepare you to get an answer right that you would have gotten wrong if you hadn't crammed. And it's a big commitment of time when you are already committing a lot of time to the interview. It's a bad investment. Okay, so it's also really important to not act slash sound desperate, even though you probably are. No one wants to hire someone who is desperate because it violates so much of the social proof that people use to figure out you're a good candidate. If no one else will hire you and you're so desperate, it makes them wonder what's wrong with you. And frankly, there's nothing wrong. Everyone goes through a grueling process when they start looking for jobs. Just don't let it get to you, or at least don't make it sound like it's gotten to you. The point here is really just to make sure you understand that it's a really annoying slash painful slash long process for everyone, and you're not alone. And I can attest to that. I mean, it's just it's a supply and demand thing. It's just the market. If they're not hiring, you're not going to get a job. It's not that you're a bad person or unqualified to get a job. It's that if you're looking for gold and there's no gold, you're not going to find gold. If you're looking for sand, you'll probably find that easier if you're in a desert. Okay, so resume versions. If you're applying to several different types of positions, tailor your resume for the specific type of opportunity. Just remember that if you're submitting it virtually, they can see the title. Oh, yeah, and the file name and all that. It's also important to note that if you're not gaining traction, getting responses with a certain resume, don't be afraid to switch it up. Keep track of the changes and see which version performs better than the others. And again, this presumes that you'll get feedback. In my experience, I've gotten no feedback, so I wouldn't have the capability to do this because no version performs better than the others. I'm just getting nothing. Cover letters. Some positions require you to submit cover letters. In our own experience, we've rarely seen the cover letter that an applicant has submitted for a job posting. They have a magical way of getting lost or ignored. If someone's spending less than 10 seconds looking at your resume first, why are they going to read a long cover letter? And this is another mistake I made during my job searching that I think I really fixed. Is I used to really stress over a cover letter, write a really well thought out cover letter, and yeah, nobody sees it. If it's mandatory, then yeah, write. And first of all, I didn't know what a cover letter was. I thought a cover letter was like one of those things where, like, things in the United States, like in the English language, have idioms where it's like what's a give me an example of like 5 idioms. So like an idiom is a phrase that has a figurative meaning different from the literal meaning. So like to break the ice would be like to tell a funny story at a party. I thought a cover letter was that. It's like, oh, it's not a letter. It doesn't have a cover on it or whatever. A cover letter is a resume. Like I was confused about that. I didn't know what a color. Oh my god. Sorry. Wow. Okay. Never mind. Sorry. Sorry, I'm next to the window, and sometimes I look out the window, and there's interesting things out the window. Or, yeah, once I saw a freaking murder occur out the window. All right, anyway, so, yeah, so, and I saw a car accident out the window once, too. Oh, man. Okay, so there we go. So if someone's spending, and when I saw the car accident out the window, I was making a YouTube video and it's in the YouTube video. Okay, so if someone's spending, yeah, so are they going to read it? No. I came to that conclusion. Basically, my advice is when you're do the things that work and don't do the things that don't. So for me, I came to the conclusion that prepping doesn't work because I'm not prepping the right way for the right things. I can't make up a knowledge deficit that's significant by prepping. It's just too large of a knowledge deficit for me to be able to overcome that in a few days or a few hours. And then the same thing for cover letters. It's stressful. It takes a long time, and it's not even going to be seen. So you have to kind of save your energy and focus your efforts in ways that are effective. And if something is really getting to you, you're better off just not doing it because it'll just slow you down. Though they may not look at your cover letter during the first pass, if your resume looks interesting, then the cover letter has a way of becoming more important. The hiring manager wants to make sure the story he crafted in his head is even more awesome in reality when hearing it from the applicant's own words. So it's important to not use meaningless buzzwords and platitudes in your cover letter, but instead focus on providing a concise but descriptive and specific letter answering the key questions we've talked about before. Are you capable of driven? And this is the other thing too. This was hard for me to understand because I'm not a neurotypical person. Obviously, should be apparent from this channel. But they don't know anything about you. Like you could be anyone. Like they don't. Everything you're telling them is the first thing they've heard about you. Like you're not. Or they see your online presence and they don't know that you are the person that they've been looking up. So like the words you say are you can't assume that it's like you want somebody to assume the best of you, but they don't know you. So like you can't just assume like, oh, I'm a great guy, everyone knows that. No, they don't. They've never met you before. This is the first time they're hearing from you. You could be the world's biggest a-hole. They don't know who you are. So like you have to say things for the a billionth time, because even though you've said them a million times before, the person you're talking to has heard it once. So you have to be comfortable with repetition, with saying the same thing over and over and over again, because the person you're saying to it this time is hearing it for the first time. And that's kind of hard for me to come to grips with. It's like, don't these people just get it? Can't they just tell? No, they can't. They've never met you before. And that's kind of what this channel is all about too, is like, I want to outsource that. I want that initial impression of me to come through my online presence that I already did, and kind of cut down on that repetition. I could just be like, oh, you've seen it. You've seen me on YouTube. You know that I've read this book or that I've did that. And they could be like, oh yeah, I did see that series. That was pretty great. Instead of, them being like, no, I don't know who you are. Tell me something about yourself. And, you not being able to prove that you are qualified because you can't come up with the right words. That's a horrible situation. I believe I've been in that situation many times before. So you need to have that elevated pitch. You need to say things for the 1,000,000th and first time, because that's the only time you're actually going to be heard. And when you're actually heard, even though you've said it a million times, it's only going to be heard one time. So you can't assume that you're being understood, even though it feels so repetitious to you. It feels like, why do I keep having to say this again and again and again? Well, the answer is because the person you're saying it to is hearing it for the first time. It also needs to answer a new question that the resume doesn't really address directly. Why does this person actually want to work at my company? That's actually very important if it's a startup or other strongly cultural organization. They're looking for people who have a very strong reason for wanting to work there so they know you'll stick around and grow with the company. Email cover letters. Every piece of communication you have with a company is relevant. The most important is the one where you first reach out via email. You will probably want to treat that as a condensed version of a cover letter. Yeah, that's a good point too. Is like a cover letter isn't yeah, and express your brilliance and fit in just a few powerful sentences. And the other things they're not really talking about is workday, or company application portals. So like it doesn't matter what format you have it in, they're going to ask for it in another format. And then in that other format that you spent hours translating it into, they're going to ignore and look at it in another format still. So you're going to have to constantly be reformatting your information, putting it in different boxes and different things, only for it to be actually accessed and looked at in the place that you least expect. So you do kind of want to have a cover letter ready, because basically you can, as I said, they don't know who you are. So if you're like, oh, sorry, I didn't know how to do this because of that. So, oh, well, he doesn't know how to do these basic things. He's completely inept, and we can't trust him to do anything. It's like, no, this is, your, yeah. So having a cover letter ready to go, just as I said before, having that full, every little tiny detail of you parent resume from which you build child resumes that are only one tailored page. Having a cover letter like that is important as well. And then from that, you branch out child cover letters that you can use in emails, that you can, these little blurbs, snippets, facts about you, because they don't know who you are. So you are going to have to say these things time and time and time again. And it's best to just have them written down somewhere and then go from that. Now, when you're actually applying, to just always put the cover letter in, I would say, as I said, condense things down, simplify, and just get the process in motion. I think it is really important. All right, so next section is applying. Track every application you send out in your spreadsheet by the date you sent it. As we said above, you don't need to go crazy on day one, but keep a regular flow of applications going out. Following up. And this is where I feel like I really struggle. Following up on all applications you care about. And I think this is where I make a mistake too, because as I said, kind of one of the big revolutionary things for me in taking interviews was to stop prepping for interviews, because you're just making the stakes so much higher. If you don't get the job, now you wasted all this time prepping. You could have been applying for other interviews. You could have just been enjoying life, doing something that isn't stressing you out. And you didn't get the job, and now you invested 20 hours into not getting the job instead of just the 5 that they were asking for interviews. So it's kind of the same thing with following up. It's stressful to follow up and stuff. So keep track of the ones where it really matters to you, if you'll get them, and only follow up with those. Follow up once in the first few days, and again after a week or two if you hadn't heard anything. This obviously works best if you've identified an individual at the company before, but the point is that perseverance matters, and it can help you display the kind of drive you're trying to show in your resume anyway. This actually applies to the whole process, not just applications. Follow up your interviews with a thank you or your interviewer on day 1 too. Follow up your tech screens. The goal here isn't to be naggy and desperate slash and annoying slash desperate. And it's certainly not to be a robot sending auto-generated emails all the time. Just be human and honest in your language, which is for somebody like me, that's not very to say just be human. I think for a lot of people, that means doing things the opposite that this would imply. So this is another one where this is the kind of what I don't like about this is like they're like, oh, just be human, just be human. It's like, what does that mean? Like, I feel like that's where I'm going to go wrong. It's like you're telling me, because I feel like that advice assumes, and as I said, this is important. Learn the culture you're in. There's cultures all over the world, and yeah, you're not just a human. You belong in a context. You belong in a culture, and learn about that. And it's about fit too. Fit is one of the major your nice to haves, your must haves in a job. You can't just be human because there's so much variety in what a human is that that's not a clear enough instruction. But at the same time, this realization I came to that prepping isn't worth my time, because when I don't get the job, if I don't get the job for investing 5 hours into it, it's a better outcome than not getting the job for investing 50 hours into it. So just don't invest the 50 hours, and then when the bad outcome happens, the bad outcome isn't as bad. And when the good outcome happens, then that's okay, you got the good outcome. Great. You're not more likely to get the good outcome if you raise the stakes on getting the bad outcome. So that would be kind of a charitable way to interpret it, that just be human. Just be yourself. Don't stress about it. If you're right for the job, you'll get hired. If you're not right for the job, make sure that the costs of not being right for the job are manageable. So did you completely try to be someone you're not? Okay, and then not get the job? You bought all new clothes. You spent 50 hours interviewing. It's there's a point where it's not worth what you're investing into. You can't completely change who you are overnight just to get the job. And then if that did work, now you've got a job where you're expected to be someone you're not full time. So just be yourself and have them take you as you are, because you wouldn't want them to take you any other way. Otherwise, that job is just going to be something not sustainable long term. All right, so mark complete, and move on to the next lesson. Okay, so we're getting near to the end here. I kind of am a little bit out of energy, believe it or not. So let's take a look at the time. Oh yeah, well past the hour mark. That's usually the most I can do. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.